can never fall. That's a bobo from Obedina Bobasro. He can never day, please you can never fall. That's a bobo from Obedina Bobasro. My mother said, you be around, and I'm being a drama. My mother said, you be around.
Welcome back to the discussion segment on the program Kaduna Today. Well, our guest this morning, during the course of the research, I found a website that described him as an extraordinary professor. He was born in 1956 in Hungary, a professor in psychology and a doctor in linguistics. Now he has held quite a number of international research, some of which we have one on cultural integration in South Africa, another on the causes and cure, a relationship between Hungarians and Gypsies, and another on social integration and education. I think that was in Italy. Well, let me just cut that short and allow him to tell us more. Our guest this morning is no other person than Professor Andreas Hejj. Professor, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Kaduna studio. And you're welcome to Nigeria. Well, in Kaduna, we usually say good morning. In Hausa, in Akwana.
Lafia low.
Yeah, I understand you started your education here in Nigeria, so welcome back home.
Thank you very much indeed. It's
Okay.
nice to be here.
Now, before we delve into the matters arising which will border mostly on your international research projects, let's just take some few minutes to get to know who Professor Andreas Hejj is.
Well, as you've said, I was born in Hungary, but my father was working here in Kaduna. He was working in the Ministry of Works. And so I grew up here. I was a small boy going to Capital School first, and then later on in due course to Government College here in Kaduna. So I got the basics of my education here in this very city. And unfortunately, there was a time when my father's contract expired. He had to go back to Hungary. And for my university studies, I couldn't stay here. I would have gone to Ahmadu Bello University in Zaria. 4 decades passed, and now I have the great chance to return to the scenes of my youth and childhood. And so it's a tremendous emotional joy to see the old house, to see the old sites, and to be around where I used to be as a child. So, and then I studied, as you were saying, psychology, became a psychologist, and at the University of Munich I received my PhD in linguistics, and started a career as a university researcher and lecturer. And in due course, I returned back to my native country of Hungary. I'm in charge of the master's and PhD program in the University of Pécs, which is a very old university, founded in 1367.
Really old.
An old, nearly 700-year-old university. And so I have international students there, and one of the secret plans I have is to get Nigerian students to come and work in our master's program, and even get Nigerian colleagues. And so I'll be going to University of Zaria to make new ties out of my old acquaintances.
That is wonderful. Well, I know if I had allowed you to explain further, the list would go on and on. But why I started off with this is to set the premise so that we would get to understand who we're talking to, who is talking to us, rather. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Well.
And most of your research work is bordered mostly on, let's say, conflict resolution, right? Especially that of South Africa, which that was on cultural integration. There are different interest groups, right? So from your various research across borders, what are the common, should I say, the indices that trigger this form of conflicts, among them, so that we would understand if most of the cases we're facing here in Nigeria are peculiar to Nigerians or Kaduna State, or are they similar across, worldwide?
Psychologists are interested in human behavior in general, and I think there are general traits to the conflict you are facing here. And I was motivated to research this because at the time it was the Biafra War, so I grew up with conflict, and at the same time I was in Government College where everybody was initiated in his own tribe, but where was my tribe? So I was trying to see and find how you can negotiate with people of very different interests. And psychology offers techniques even for wildly opposed groups. And you were referring to one of the studies that I was doing in Italy with Italian and German-speaking minorities who were violently in opposition because the Germans thought the Italians had stolen their countries and the others thought differently. And even today, these people are very hard to get along. They don't get along with each other very well. So it was our duty to let them sit down at the same table and negotiate. So how do we do that? And the same thing applied to South Africa of apartheid, of the old days. So the basic technique is to first explain to both groups that it is very important that they sit down and non-violently express what they wish. And the other group will have exactly the same chance to express their own group, their own views. And what the moderator or the facilitator of such a non-violent discussion group is responsible for is that the first group can state how they think the second group views things, as long as the second group says, yes, we agree, you have got our point. They don't have to agree with the others, but they have to understand what the others will. And then the same thing happens. So the first step is that each group understands what the other group's aspects are, what they are aiming at. And then you realize that the person you're facing might have different views, religious, political, whatever, but they're a human person just like yourself, with the same anxieties, with the same hopes, with the same fears. And that is a very major aspect in promoting communication. And rather than to think they are the sons of the devil, they are evil incorporated, you realize that they are human beings like yourselves. And on the individual level, you start understanding that communication is possible because you're sitting in the same boat. You have to get to the same objective. You want to stay alive. You want your families to be safe, prosper together. So this is something that is designed for a period. It's not a one single discussion. It is a set of discussions, let's say at a weekly basis, 2 hours a week, and a group extreme representing the one side and another group of extremes representing the other side, maybe 6 people on each side, will negotiate for a year and then gradually find, yes, there are solutions, and then they can carry it out to their own representative groups.
I love the part of non-violent, that's dialogue.
Yes.
To foster, resolution of various conflict views. But the first step, getting the two opposing, getting not necessarily 2, there could be more than 2, just getting the interest groups to agree to sit and discuss. Now, I believe
that's not as difficult as you think, because in the first step they think, I am going to show those idiots that I am the only person who is right. So people are, like male dogs fighting. It's the ego who gets them there. But then they get curious and they say, well, there's a point. That's an interesting view. And then because you see things not at an anonymous, but on a personal level, where you see somebody in the eyes, where you can really talk to somebody and react to somebody's emotion, then gradually you see, well, a few things maybe we can do together. And then the scope of things that they can do together is growing and growing until they can reach a compromise, a solution that is agreeable and acceptable to all sides. Okay,
now let's go a step further. If they eventually agree and they sit and the discussion takes off successfully and peacefully, now let's move. The step further I'm talking about is on the area of integration. How would we get to integrate and, find our common level and continue with life as usual, living peacefully, respecting each other's views? Now, the area of integration, especially as it pertains to if the interest groups have a marginalized group. Now, how would we come about, accepting them and integrating them into the society?
Well, we have a case of that in Hungary, that is the gypsy population. To 10 million Hungarians, we have approximately 1 million gypsies.
Wow.
So it's a 10%
Ratio,
minority,
1 to 10
yes.
ratio.
But they have far more children than Hungarians do. So you can see that this ratio is going to change. And Hungarians are very much afraid of the gypsies taking over. And the gypsies are very much afraid of the Hungarians, because they say Hungarians are going to eradicate us. They are very violent against us, and they have their fears.
Okay.
Now, of course, this is not just between these two groups, but there are interest groups that say, yes, as long as Hungarians fight gypsies, they are not interested, and they do not see who exactly is taking their money, their benefits, their property, their land. So it is very important that we have a gypsy faculty at our university where we train gypsies, where they become professional academics, in fact, and they are examples, living examples for their own group to see, yes, now I've got a good training, a good education, I am able to get a good job, I'm able to hold up my family, and I can understand some of the fears of the Hungarians, because you know, people are different, they have different customs, and if you do something that is quite proper in one country, for example, just take one thing, in South Africa it is quite normal for somebody who enters a house to sit down immediately, because the aspect is to look up at the ogre, at the boss of the house.
Okay.
And many white people in South Africa think it is impolite that somebody, I didn't even offer a seat, and he sits down, because they don't understand that he's actually showing respect. It's showing respect and not understanding that the other person is showing respect. I'm not saying that everything is as easy as this, but one part of it is to understand what is meant by the expression somebody shows. It might not be as violent as people will interpret it, because they see it from their own way. And you know, hand signs can be very, very different. In the United States, for example, this sign means, are you okay? This is quite a polite sign. There's nothing insulting in that. Show this in Germany, and you will be fined, a big fine, because they think this is a big insult, because it reminds you to the southernmost point of your digestive channel, to put it very softly, and of course this is a very big insult. So an American might want to say, are you okay, and gets fined because the German judge will think that he was insulting. So one part is, of course, knowing what is expression in one group, what is proper behavior in the other group. But another part is that people have anxiety, people are fearful of unknown behavioral patterns, of unknown dresses, foods, smells, whatnot. And of course, if there is a genuine conflict, because people say the only way to have the land run is if my group is in lead, then of course there is a conflict, because there are different groups competing for the same position. And rather than to see, it is important that the land be organized well for all of us, the one group and the other group. Then trust and you know, relying on the other person has to be able to come about. And you do not rely on somebody you do not know. So that is why it is very important to gradually get to know what the other people are really aiming at, what their anxieties are.
Then it builds the trust, and
you build
opens,
trust.
you know, the communication channel that would eventually, you know, bring about peaceful coexistence among them. Now let's talk about the youth. The youth, because mostly, especially when any form of conflict gets violent, they are the soldiers. They are the ready tools. You know, so let's talk about youth psychology. How can we get to turn around, you know, disabuse the minds of youth from being violent to rather being, you know, developing their minds to being self-reliant, and also developing not just the society but even within themselves, you know, to in the area of, let's say, building self-confidence?
I think it's very hard for young people today, because they get a lot of information and influence that is not always in their best interest. I'm talking of the internet. I'm talking of international channels, loads of information without any emotional founding, because it's virtual information. And this virtual information is sort of a poisoning of young people's minds as long as they are not very well based in their own culture. And that is why I think initiation is a very important issue, because if a tree stands firmly in its own roots, in its own soil, then winds can come, weather can come, it's going to grow and it's going to prosper. And so it is extremely important that before young people start going on the internet and thinking that everything they see there is good and clean and true, that they actually have a funded knowledge of their own culture and initiated where they live in their own tradition. And then they can see, okay, other people have different views, and let me select if part of this view is acceptable and can be made useful within my own context, or else just leave it alone. That's somebody else's idea, and I don't have to take it for granted. You know, so it is very, very, very important that young people do not uncritically follow the ideas that they get on the internet. Young people are there to fight. They have a lot of bodily, physical energy, healthy, and this energy has to be made use of. And if you just sit in front of the computer, you're not letting this energy serve the purpose it is made for. They are not giving it out for physical movement. So it is very, very important that they realize this energy, that they go doing sports, that they go running, that they actually are fit, bodily, physically fit, because otherwise they have all this energy, and then it is violently loaded upon one picture that is meant to be the enemy, whatever the enemy might mean, whatever group it might mean, and then it becomes dangerous. So it is important, two things. One, very well based in the culture in your own culture, knowing what is important to you, knowing what your culture's values are. For example, human life is a big value, whoever is the owner of this particular human life. And the other thing is to make sure that these bodily energies of young people are taken into consideration. Young people do need movement. They need bodily challenge. Whatever the culture offers, every culture offers a healthy, a good chance for young people to compete, to be in athletics, their chances are many.
Is there a role government can play when it comes to conflict resolution?
I think, yes. In the first place, setting values, saying what is allowed, for example, negotiation. The other party should be able to express their views, but not violently, in a proper way, in an acceptable way. They should not be silenced. That's one thing. But the other thing is, under no circumstances tolerate violent expression. As much as I stress the opportunity to be able to let people voice their views, but always respecting the other as humans, as meeting people at the eye level, saying, yes, I have the right to have my views, but only as long as I respect your right to have your views. And then we'll discuss and see who has the better arguments. So I think government should really eradicate and say, no, we're not tolerating any form of aggressive expression, violence, but we are accepting challenges, verbal challenges, non-violent verbal challenges to other views, with the purpose of finding the best solutions within the framework of value systems that is acceptable to all of society. For example, an unlimited respect to human life.
Okay. How about the role that non-governmental organizations, like international interest groups, donor agencies, are there roles that they can also play when it comes to conflict resolution?
I think one of the things is that they can encourage education, that they can also encourage discussions of this sort in a non-formal situation. They can also at times allow people to learn other people's views, like taking them abroad, taking them on study groups. Occasionally this is an alternative. And of course they can stage competitions between the groups, peaceful competitions, sports competitions, intellectual competitions, depending on the age and education of the people concerned.
Now we've taken a look at the two arrowheads towards conflict resolutions. That's government and also non-governmental organizations. Now, I'm going to use an analogy of, let's say, the game of football. We have two different teams, opposing teams, and then we have the referee that would judge. Now, in this case, when it comes to conflict resolution, who would be the appropriate judge? Because if, I don't know, who do you think would be the appropriate judge now?
The only thing that can function on a long scale is if society is the judge. Society, because a society will have to agree on the value systems that are acceptable. The referee can only play a referee because he knows what is considered to be a goal. So he couldn't just claim if somebody rolls the ball on his finger, he couldn't say this is a goal, because the referee knows this is not our value system. We have well defined what is the goal. And so it is very important that society knows what the goal is, and the goal could be living in safety, doing away with fences. That could be one of the goals. We say we would like to live in a society where people are so safe that they do not need fences around them. That you may send your child outside to the street without any worry that they can be violently hit or they can go to mosque or church, completely sure that they will come back with a spiritual experience and not with some bombshells in their bodies. So I think it is important that society be conscious of how they would like to live. What are the values? And of course, this is something that they say, okay, this I need, so this I have to give to my fellow citizens, to the other groups as well, because they are just like me, so they want safety and security as well. And occasionally, they want to appear there in their own colors, and they might be very different from my colors, but that's fine.
That's life.
That's life. And they might want to have a different music or a different prayer. That's fine. That composes the life. Is not, biology did not aim at uniformity. Look at all the beautiful flowers you have around you here in Kaduna. They're not the same. It is not a uniform flower, and we are not uniform flowers either. So allow this and marvel at the different kinds of flowers that humans around you might show in this blossoming world.